the things that make you uncomfortable, because sometimes you need to push and sometimes you actually don't like them. And I feel like when I started my business, that was like a real thing, because I was happy to, I started with the mindset that I was going to be uncomfortable and we were going to get through it. And I was like, no matter what, we were going. And it's like I did lots of things that made me super uncomfortable and I kept going. And I'm so proud that I did those things because I think that it was like part of the journey. But then I also look at things that I was like never going to be good at that. I was never going to like that. But it's like sometimes you have to actually be willing to at least give it a shot. Hello and welcome to the Service-Based Business Society podcast. I am your host, Tiffany-Ann Bottcher. If you are ready to scale your success, grow your business, and live that entrepreneurial life, click subscribe because we're about to get started. Welcome back for another episode. We're here with Stef. Stef returns to us from season 3, episode 14, and she was also in season 3, episode 22. She wasn't really with us, but I did spend a little bit of time talking about her. So if you haven't heard those episodes, you can go back and listen, but we're going to jump right in and we're going to talk about communities, how they are more than just a Facebook group, and the actual mindset shift and growth opportunities that are involved. So welcome to the show, Stef.
Oh, thank you.
So I'll be honest, I was searching through our past episodes. I really thought you had been on the podcast more than one time. And then I realized, well, it was one time plus then there was a whole episode where I kind of had it about you. So we say you were moonlighting in that episode. But what has been happening since you were last year?
When was I last year? Was that like a year and a half ago?
Last February.
Last February?
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like this has been a crazy, crazy year. Mm-hmm. It's been like, it was the year that my business was going to take off. And I say was because it still really had a really good formation. I've really found what I wanted to speak about. I really found what I wanted to do. I made some shifts. But a lot of personal stuff happened. And then it also taught me more about what was important to me on the business side of things. And it really shifted my mindset around what I wanted to focus on, who I wanted to focus it on with, what served me, what didn't. So I'll be honest, it was like not the year I expected in my business at all. But I'm happy with how it's turned out. We're getting pretty close to the end of the year.
It's always interesting when it doesn't necessarily, it's like the journey versus the destination. But I will say that I think out of all the business owners I know, you were one that actually was probably closer to knowing those kinds of things previously. So for you to say, now I know what's important, like more important to me and stuff, because I think that already you had, had specific hours and boundaries and knew which clients you loved and which ones you didn't. So interesting that I would have thought you were one of the best at that. And then you have a year and you say, well, that came, and I think, oh, wow, I have a long way to go.
Yeah. I mean, you've known me long enough to know that I dedicate a lot of my life to self-improvement. And I know that sounds really cliche, but I have done a lot of the self-improvement that's not fun. And I did a lot of training around it. I've always searched for how does my brain work? How do other people's brains work? And with a marketing background, it actually just fits into business.
And it's a bit of a rabbit hole.
Right? It's totally a rabbit
hole.
Endless rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, you talked about it being a year that was, I've talked on the podcast before. I made some choices last year in business, and it ultimately derailed one of my businesses for a year. It took a year to recover, and we kind of finally came around the other side. And there was actually, you get those kind of moments that pop up on Facebook and whatnot. The store, last year this time, I always find those ones crazy because you're like, whoa, that was a year ago. And it's, some changes, some choices can ultimately have a really long effect, some positive and some obviously not so much.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Like, even just coming into this podcast studio, I was reminded of an event I didn't like 4 years ago. And it didn't trigger me because, I'd done a lot of work, but it was just like something in the back of my mind that I was just like, ooh, that impacted my business, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like a lot of times we're not honoring those things and we just kind of shove them to the back of our brains, or we don't work through them, or we don't even, sometimes people work through them, and I say that with air quotes, because then they think that it's completely gone, but it becomes part of who you are, right? And that's
mm-hmm.
even it evolves into your business, it evolves into your life, all these things that come and go. But unless we can actually take a step back and look at and be like, okay, that sucked, or that was great.
Mm-hmm.
How do we move forward with that, right? And I think as business owners, a lot of times we're just shoving stuff in the closet.
100%. There is a closet full of skeletons. I often talk about that from a bookkeeping perspective to our bookkeeping clients, where, you know, it's like you at least should know what skeletons are in the closet. I mean, everyone's got a couple, but like at least know what's behind the door.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you're my bookkeeper, because I don't like those skeletons.
We try to avoid them.
Right?
We try to avoid them for sure. So you've had this year and it's grown, and I mean, obviously we spend some time together and whatnot, and so I have seen, you know, your community grow, and it's interesting because obviously in 2024 we see the community of Taylor Swift and the Swifties, which I think is probably one of the most inspiring communities. I mean, whether you like Taylor Swift or not, her ability to captivate an audience and really just like these people, it's everything. It's everything Taylor Swift. I was seeing on social media recently that they now have like these funny videos of where things went wrong, and they call it the errors tour. And it's done in like a cute, like, oh my gosh, look at that, how great she handled it. It's like something went wrong, but it's like the community believes in her so much that is like it's a positive, and I'm like it's so inspiring.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, community is like everything nowadays, and I think it's so funny that you bring up Swifties, because my niece is a Swiftie, and I was like, I remember what it was like to be like so obsessed with things. Let's be honest, still am. But like, yeah, with community, I think it's really coming forward more than ever, because we spent the last few years, like, you think COVID, it was all about like me. I need to protect myself. I need to be myself. And my entire thing's personal branding. So you think it would be like all about you, but really everyone's like craving back that community. Everybody naturally is looking for a place to belong, to grow together. And, you know, we talk about the people that come and go in our life, and knowing who fits into that space and who doesn't has been even more important than ever. And I think, yeah, community is kind of where we're headed.
I feel like for a long time the word community makes you think Facebook group. There was a phase of time there where it was like if you wanted to do anything in the world, you needed a Facebook group. I mean, when we started this podcast, it had a Facebook group. I learned along the way that I don't really like being a part, like being the person, the leader of the Facebook group. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So we shut that down and now have switched and are rebuilding now basically with an Instagram profile and LinkedIn, which is kind of our two different audiences. But it's interesting because there's this shift now where it's people, you know, more getting out and whatnot. But when we hear networking, when we hear community, people talk about this like referral networks. I think BNI, I think, is the one, and Facebook groups. And so I think that you build community in a very different way.
Yeah, yeah. I like how you just kind of like, you build it in a different way. And I'm like, do I build it in a different way? I think I love how you said, like, leading this Facebook group and everything. And you're like, I don't like it. And I feel like a lot of people don't actually like to lead that stuff because it's a lot of responsibility. And I was like that too. And then I found like, actually, I love it. I freaking like, you know, you have to work through, and like, this is a little bit of a segue, but you really have to, if you want something like deep in your core and there's a little gremlin on your shoulder saying like, this is not like something I want to do. I always say like, explore that a little bit, because like, maybe it's actually something you do want to do and you just have a few mental blocks along the way to get rid of them first. And so when it came to building communities, if you would have said to me, like, we've known each other for a long time now, but if you had said to me in the beginning, like, Steph, you're going to like lead a community, all those kind of things, I'd be like, no. Because a lot of things were like, I was scared of having that responsibility of holding space and all that kind of stuff. So when you say Facebook group, like leading it, I'm like, that sounds fun. I reignited mine. I don't know how well Facebook groups are actually going to do, but I have been a part of so many communities. Like, I have been in BNIs, I have been in casual networking, I have done the online networking thing. So now, like, I love community more than anything. I think that's actually what fills my soul. And so I've built this community that you're a part of that has a little bit of a different spice to it, right? Where come as you are, be accepted as you are, but also be pushed in the way that you want to be pushed, right? And I think a lot of the people that come into my community space are actually people who haven't fit in communities before, because my main messaging is very much like, be yourself, be encouraged for that. Be your weirdness, do things in a way that works for you. And to be honest, a lot of communities don't work that way. A community where everyone's in a group program, in a group situation, usually has to fit into a lot of boxes. So in my community, there is certain standards, there's certain things that I say, hey, if you want to be in my space, you kind of have to have this, this, and this. But for the most part, it's about like creating this interdependence of like, okay, you are awesome at your thing, I am awesome at my thing, let's do this together, right? And so I really feel like when I was searching for community, it was very like cliquey, like many communities are. I got my feelings hurt a lot. I just didn't mesh a lot. So building my community, I was just like, okay, what can I learn from that? What can I learn from BNI? What can I learn from casual networking and all those kind of things, and bring it all together in this safe space that's easy for people to tap into, and in different ways, right? Like, so I host in-person things, but I also have an online community. So it's just, yeah, I think when people are looking for community, you really have to be like, okay, what's not the hottest, the popular, or what's not good, like what's the one with the formula that's going to work? No, like what's the community that's going to feel like me, right? And I think that's where people need to find their space a little bit more, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you talked about kind of knowing, doing the things that make you uncomfortable, because sometimes you need to push and sometimes you actually don't like them. And I feel like when I started my business, that was like a real thing, because I was happy to, I started with the mindset that I was going to be uncomfortable and we were going to get through it. And I was like, no matter what, we were going. And it's like I did lots of things that made me super uncomfortable, and I kept going. And I'm so proud that I did those things, because I think that it was like part of the journey. But then I also look at things that I was like never going to be good at that. I was never going to like that. But it's like sometimes you have to actually be willing to at least give it a shot. I mean, had someone said, oh, you're going to be on YouTube and do podcasts and, enjoy photo shoots and do all these things, it was a no. But so then you do them and then you find out, oh, actually, I really enjoy this. But then there's these pieces like, leading a Facebook group and doing those kinds of things that I'm like, I can go create a Facebook group. It's not going to be a great one, but I can create that group. But it's just like such a knowing when and knowing like when to hold and when to go is such a challenge in that pushing yourself, thinking big.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I feel like a lot of people are trying to do all the things still, right? And as business owners, and to be honest, I mentioned I got hurt a lot. That's usually what happens. We get jaded by a partner, we get screwed over by a client or something, or we let that one thing go and it blows up in our face, right? And so then we want to just do everything ourselves.
Yes. And
so then we kind of shy away from community, and we're like, but I don't want to depend on anyone. Right. And I feel like that's kind of what happened a lot. And especially with the people that kind of come in and out of my community, they're usually neurodivergent, very empathetic, very sensitive people. So it just hits us a little bit harder. And so we've pulled away, and that's where like even some of the mindset things come in, where it's like, okay, yes, you got hurt, but okay, like what's going to happen differently, right? And so that I feel like is where community kind of comes in, right? And so a lot of entrepreneurs are like, like take a graphic designer. I can say graphic design because that's my background, but like, the graphic designer who becomes a web designer, who becomes like runs an agency, who does this, and this, which is great. It's a great model. But then they start to do absolutely everything. They start to do all the social media strategies, start to do everything. And then it's like they feel like they can't depend on anyone anymore because they're going to step on some toes, right? And that's kind of where like some of the professions are going, but then you become very lonely and you don't really become specialized anymore. And even for like agencies like yours that do a bunch of really cool things, you guys still focus on like the general, like this is this and this is what we do. So it's like, how do we marry those things together? Like, let's not depend on each other completely to get everything done, but I still want the support of the people around me. And I really feel like that's what community is about, right? Like, stop trying to do everything, right? Let's be good at what you want to do.
Yeah.
Build whatever empire you want to do, and then share it with these people who are like bringing you along, right?
Absolutely. I think there's so much strength when you combine different skills and attributes, because, how you look at something might be different than how someone else looks at something. It's the same as growing a team and having diversity. You don't want to hire a bunch of yourselves because ultimately that is just chaotic. You want to, there needs to be balance. And I often refer back to like my time in corporate. I had 2 business partners, 3 very different people. And why did that work? Why did that business grow so quickly? And how did it work together? Well, because we trusted each other to stay in each other's lanes, and ultimately at times super frustrating because, the person who's a little more of the like rule follower and the black and white gets frustrated when the person is a little more Wild West, as we'll say politely.
Yeah.
But you know what? At the end of the day, I now growing my own, empire, as we'll call it. It really comes down to now I see more value in that. And that's like a shift in an evolution in my own mindset. I think, gosh, why didn't I pay a little more attention? I could use a little bit of that right now. I thought recently I was working on this deal, and I thought, gosh, if I could just ask him just a couple of questions, that would be really helpful. Because it's, there's everyone has all of these different ways of doing things. None of them 100% right or 100% wrong. And it's finding the, different pieces and, picking out what works and tossing the rest.
Yeah. Actually, I love that you said nobody's ever 100% right, 100% wrong. Wow, are we in a day and age where that is more important than ever? Like, I fundamentally hold the belief that everybody is right in their own mind, right? And that's really hard to stomach sometimes.
It really
right?
is.
I mean, obviously current events right now are cycling through my head, and you're kind of like, you're looking at the other side and be like, wow, what's going on, right? But like when we take a step back and we say, I can see how you're right. Doesn't mean it's right for me, but maybe it's right for you, and I can see where you're coming from. You start to actually see where the ebb and flows are, right? And so I love that you say, like, bring some of those people into your space. Yeah, it's probably not going to be easy every time because you don't want absolutely everybody like you. I mean, I do everything around soulmate clients, and it's not about finding the person who's perfect for you that's going to work exactly the way. It's the person who's going to help you grow and the person that's going to light your passion on fire the most. And I think that's where community kind of comes in too. And even just having like the chance to sit in a like hypothetical room when it comes to say Zoom and talk to 20 other people who have similar values but maybe just might look at things in a different light. I think that's so cool, right? And it's tough sometimes because we get in our head like, no, this is the way it has to be done. But what if it doesn't? And I think that's where, as you said, community, and when I say community, that could even just be your team, right? But when I think of community, it's like the spaces that I hold are a lot of very opinionated, very passionate entrepreneurs who are just trying to be like, hey, you're safe here. Right? And they're like, ah.
I think anything that really runs on passion. I was talking to my husband just the other day because, my son plays lacrosse and it's a volunteer association. And there was we were talking about, basically some people and their level of passion, we'll say. And I said, but here's the thing. All of those people are so passionate that they are volunteering, endless amounts of their time. They're dedicated to this. They have, full careers and lives and families and whatever. But then you look at how much time and I'm like, it takes the passion to be willing to do that. It takes the passion to be able to, but then you can't be surprised when those people are passionate and, it's the same thing in your business. You need to have enough passion to enjoy what you do because ultimately no one says you have to get out of bed and go get to your desk. There's no one saying you must do it or I'm not paying you. I mean, I guess your clients if you really don't show up, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's a certain level of personal accountability that is required. And so, without a passion and a dedication to what you're doing, I mean, it kind of fizzles.
Yeah. And I feel like you sitting in front of me, this is an excellent way to interject. One of my most passionate communities is Dachshunds. For people who don't know, is wiener dogs, right? And we're laughing about this now because I have a wiener dog and you have two wiener dogs, and we were friends and clients before the wiener dogs. But as
Yes.
soon as you're like, wiener dogs, I'm like, heck yeah, we're just friends for life now, right?
Yeah.
And like, I run a Facebook group. We talk about Facebook groups and leading them, and it's like 4,000 people in there almost in all of BC. Like, that's a lot of wiener dogs. And it's a lot of time. And like sometimes I get messages where I'm being like too strict on things. And it's like, well, as you said, takes a lot of passion. And with passion, you have to have like, okay, these are my boundaries and this is how I'm going to have to do it. And I think like the thought flowing through my head right now is sometimes people look at people leading communities and they're like, oh, well, they're very, very rigid in some ways. They're very like they become so much more judged. And I think that's where people get scared of leading communities, because you do become judged. But the only way you can lead a space is with a little bit of structure.
Yeah.
And you get to decide what that structure is, right? So like, you know, I think of all these wiener dogs and all this passion and all this time. And like, you know, we had Halloweener a month ago and it's like 70 wiener dogs show up and you're just like, this is a lot of passion, right? And so I like to look at people, what are they passionate outside of their work and how do they bring it in? Because those are the people you want to get on board with. Those are the people I like to hang out with. What are they freaky passionate about, right? Like, because you know they're going to get their work done.
So obviously the wiener dog is it's a thing.
It's a thing.
And so, you know, I absolutely adored yours and then had been working on, you know, convincing my husband for 2 years to get a dog. And then a week before we bring home, you know, puppy number 1, he says, well, why don't we get puppy number 2 at the same time? You know, way to be efficient, just, you know, 1, 2.
Totally.
And so, but then I'm of course doing all this research online, and I'm a part of this Facebook group, and all of a sudden I'm realizing that, you know, you're leading this Facebook. I didn't even know, and so I mean, one community is lots, but multiple communities, I mean, that's just a level of just I don't even know people energy that
yeah, you know, I used to like hate people. Like, but then I realized like through like back to those like mindset blocks and stuff, it wasn't like so many people are like, I hate people. And you're like, no, I'm just really sensitive to how people are feeling, or I'm sensitive to how I'm feeling, or I get overwhelmed easily. It's not that like, I think biologically we like people. We just don't like what they do or make us feel or any of that kind of stuff. So when I realized, no, I actually really like people, I just need space from people, then it's like, yeah, like I could build communities all day long. Like that's really what changed for me over the last year. I went from somebody who's like, please leave me alone all the time, which I still have those days. But now, yeah, as you said, like a big Facebook group of wiener dogs, which is an in-person thing. And then, yeah, my online communities, which is like we meet together, to talk about our personal brands, and we build content, in-person networking, a mastermind. Like, please just give me another community. I would love that.
And that goes back to that whole, you know, people who have different things pair together. And I love being a part of your community. I genuinely, and I don't make all of them, but I look forward to some of the events with the people because they are the right people that have been assimilated. I think that that's really part of it, because when you're a part of any kind of group where it's just kind of mismatched, there's a bit of a disconnect there. So, you know, and you were talking about structure, and I think it's important in so many different, I mean, I like structure, so we could talk about why we need structure all day long, but you know, it's in terms of, you know, putting yourself out there, whether you're leading a community, whether you're leading a team, whether you're showing up on social media, you know, ultimately at one point, someone's going to say something or disagree with you. And I think so often we, you know, feel like, oh, it was the wrong direction, and people stop. They stop going and get derailed. And I think it's tough because you are putting yourself out there, but kind of deciding right from the get-go that you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And owning a business is hard. Being friends with people is hard. Life is hard, right? And I think
way to be positive,
right?
Steph.
Well, I'm gonna switch that. But it's also beautiful. It's also challenging in a good way. It's fun. There's so many amazing opportunities. We are, while it's a stressful time for many, we're living in a very cool time too, right? Like we're on a podcast right now, just talking about stuff, right? That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. And I really feel like that's where there's such a big gap in business is just how are you thinking about things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like when people say mindsets, it's not just about like journaling and all that kind of stuff, but like, yeah, like how are you thinking about things moving forward? What is in your way? Why is it in your way?
Mm-hmm.
Is it in your way just because like you're lazy today, or like this is some childhood trauma you got, right?
So this year, speaking of childhood trauma, I went to multiple medical professionals and they kept saying I needed to deal with a few things.
Yeah.
And everyone kept talking about like this EMDR and I should try this out and whatever. And so actually I had this person who I'd been on a marketing sales call with, and she had been talking to me about her business. And because I was like, what do you do? Like, asking that, like, who do you help? And like trying to get and while we were on the sales call, I'm like, I need this. Like,
Yeah.
this is amazing. And so now that, the doctor and then the other doctor and is like, oh, you need that. So I was like, I remember. So like, it's like a year and a half later and I like follow up with her and I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
we're going to go the other way.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come hang out, And so it was really about one specific thing is how it started. And we were going to do EMDR about this car accident that I was in. And I was like, okay, I was going in with a lot of structure. Turns out when you're doing personal development, sometimes structure is a little less structure.
Yeah.
And we did all sorts of things. But one of the things that we talked about was this kind of like anxiety and that which just felt normal to me, like worrying and worrying about what people were thinking or whatnot. We worked through a lot of things, and she asked a lot of questions. Why do you feel that way? Like, what would be another way that you could feel? And it has really shifted my business which was a totally different direction that I was planning on going, because now I seem to just have less feeling about things. And sometimes it is just, I kind of think about just like turning down the volume, where it's not everything is for me needs to be so emotional. I'm an overthinker. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
Overthinkers Club. Yeah. And I think that's another like, topic of today is community, right? And that is one thing that I really love bringing into community is also like how are you thinking about things, right? And just bringing some attention to that. And I love that you did all that work, because it totally shows in your business later, right? And even like, the beginning of one of our calls the other day in my group, we were talking like, okay, like we did this like visualization of this tree and like all these branches and like what branches needed to be pruned and all that kind of stuff. And it's surprising how many people just don't stop and just be like, okay, like I am overwhelmed. I am anxious. This isn't normal to be like this 24/7. But we feel like it has been, right? And so, I love that. Like when you told me about that, I was like, yes, right? It's just so cool. There's so many cool ways of like approaching things, and I think we just go so far into the marketing and so far into everything. But having that community space to just say, hey, I'm struggling a little bit with this, and having somebody be like, okay, well, what can we do about it?
Yeah.
Right? Like my mastermind call yesterday, for example, that was the call, right? Like I'm in there with my like few people who are in there, and we're like, one of them said, I can't post. I don't want to post. And rather than just be like, we'll just do it, like what most people say, it's like, let's take a step back. What is the thing in your way here?
Yeah.
And it ended up being like a little bit of an insecurity, ended up being something from like 5 years ago, just in a quick community conversation, right? And so,
well, it's interesting how we really do get in our own heads about lots of different things. And so, one of the things that I work through is kind of this sense of obligation of, and so it's, I was saying, oh, and it was in casual conversation. She's like, oh, are you, looking forward to such and such? And I was like, I mean, not really. And she was like, well, why are you going? I was like, well, because I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
And she's like, according to who? And I was like, well, I mean, I've always done it that way, which is interesting because that is my worst saying when it comes to business. People, do things in a very, old-fashioned, outdated way. And I always say, why do we do it this way? And people say, well, because we've always done it that way. And I'm like, that is terrible, terrible. And as I was sitting there, I was like, oh my goodness, it's leaving my mouth. And I was like, and so, it's this shift of like, well, just because it was that way doesn't mean it needs to be that way. And so it's just such an interesting shift. And so I stopped doing
Yeah.
doing it. And nothing, nobody died.
No.
Nobody died.
No, and that's such a good thing. I love that that's where things have gone, or like even, if I can't do this today, okay, cool, right? There's just a little bit more flexibility out there. I'm a believer in the like self-care without being selfish mentality, where I love that you said what is this? It's a sense of obligation. Well, why? Right? And if you're like there's no reason behind it, then cool. But what if you said, well, my friend really depends on me for this, right? And I feel like we've actually lost that step a little bit.
Yes.
Where let's marry both sides, right? Do I really need to do this? No. Does the person who depends on me really
Yes.
need me to do this? Then yes, right? And let's like finding that balance and balance, right?
Well, but I mean, in everything in business and life, it's that pendulum swing.
Yeah.
It's one way, and we're like, oh, it's not good. It's not good. We're all feeling, and then it's like, whoop, we go the other way, and you're like, oh, now we're like letting people down.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's got to come back to the middle, and I think that applies to so many things. It's the you've been burnt by a team member, so now you say, I'm not hiring. I'm doing everything myself because I can do it faster and better myself. And sure, you probably can, but you can't grow any bigger because you're still one human. So at one point you have to take that step. Or, whether it's, politics, or whether it's, different policies, or whatever, there's always this, oh, we didn't like this, but then it's the overshoot back to the other way.
Yeah. And I really feel like the start of this conversation is like we've gone from always wanting to just be ourselves, and it's like now we're craving that group again, but so many people are scared because they're like, oh, I'm gonna get hurt. All right, it's like, okay, well, let's go in it with a little bit more consciousness around it. Okay, this didn't work for me the last time. What if I do get hurt? Right? What will I do about it?
Yeah.
What if things go wrong? What will I do about it? Right? Like, I'm a believer in plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Back to that overthinker
right?
club.
Exactly. But really, it's also releasing that, like, and it's like even just that analogy of love, right? Like, do you want to be alone forever, or do you want to take a chance that you're going to meet somebody and it's going to go bad, but maybe it's going to be fabulous, right? So I feel like let's bring that back to community mindset, where it's like you just need to date around a little bit, find the spaces that work well for you. Maybe you'll get hurt, maybe you will hurt, or maybe you'll like birth the most amazing business you've ever dreamed of.
Well, I think there's many people in history that have gone and have made many unsuccessful things. And then, it was that one decision, the one thing, the change, and went on to be wildly successful. And so, it's continuing when and back to that continuing when it's uncomfortable, but not just in the things that you want to do or not do, but overall, if you are committed to the journey, if you are committed to being a business owner, then it's not going to be a smooth ride. There will be twists and turns and bumps, and so, but you gotta be committed to the journey.
Yeah, and I cannot say enough, especially recently, especially over the last couple of years, of the people who journey with me. Like, even I think of you, like when some of this personal stuff has happened. Like, we have a business relationship, but we also have a friendship. And I just said, hey, this is going on, and you're like, that sucks. And that's all you needed to hear in that moment. Mm-hmm. And then other times it's like, this is going on, and you're like, that's fabulous, right?
Yes.
And so I love that you've been journeying with me, and it is all about the journey. And I think we need to focus on that a little bit more.
100%. It can be lonely. Yeah. And so as much as, even as introverts, even as non-people, I don't want to lead the community, but I genuinely enjoy being a part of your community. So where is it? Where can people find this community?
Community. Okay. So there's a couple things. And for my in-person people, like in Vancouver, we have an in-person networking. That's just a little bit of an offshoot. The big thing I'm really passionate about right now is literally called the Soulmate Client Society. Let's get that right, Steph. And literally that's just soulmateclient.com. This is a community that's meant to be so low cost. It's such an easy yes. We meet twice a month on Zoom. And it's really for the entrepreneur who wants to step into a personal brand, find their soulmate clients, find the people that gel with them, want to work on that interpersonal. So like, I do my thing, you do your thing, and we do it together, and just have a little bit of feedback on everything that they're doing. So that's the big thing that I'm working on right now. And then obviously there's a mastermind part of that too. But Soulmate Clients is the place to hang out. Soulmateclient.com.
Right? Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to click subscribe, comment below, and share the episode with a fellow entrepreneur. If you want to take us on the road, we are available everywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much. See you next time.